Well, hello and welcome to the New York Book Industry Guild's first program of the new year, President's Night. My name is Karen Romano and I am the current president of the Guild. Traditionally, this is a night when we have the good fortune to hear from an influential industry leader, which seems particularly apropos this year on the eve of a national inauguration. And we are extremely fortunate to have Madeline McIntosh, the CEO of Penguin Random House US, with us tonight. President's Night at the Book Industry Guild also means giving a shout out to past presidents of the Guild for their contributions. I would ordinarily ask these folks to stand, so please feel free to do so now wherever you are. We applaud you all. I will not go back to 1925 for all of the obvious reasons, but I believe that the past presidents that we have with us here tonight, even though we can't see them, are Janet McCarthy Grimm, Sheila Anderson, Linda Palladino, Steve Bedney, Michelle Rothbarb, Eric Schwartz, Diana G., Jody Saunders-Ray, and our immediate past president, Martha Hanson. So I want to thank them all for all of the very hard work that they've done over the years and for the many contributions they've made to making this organization such a great organization. It is now with great pleasure that I introduce Madeline McIntosh. Madeline has been the CEO of Penguin Random House US since 2018. She has worked in publishing for almost 3 decades, and in that time has held positions in publishing, sales, operations, and audio, and was a pioneer in the early development of online sales and in the digital transition. She serves on the board of directors of Poets and Writers, which is the nation's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to serving creative writers. And for those of you who don't know it, you should, it's wonderful. And Sourcebooks, in which Penguin Random House is also an investor. She lives in New York with her husband, Chris Pavone, who's a writer, and her twin sons. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Madeline.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you for having me tonight. And hello to everybody out there. I hope wherever you are healthy and making your way through this winter okay. Here in my town, we just now had bells ringing at the church to memorialize those lost to COVID. And my heart is certainly with any of you who have lost loved ones during this really, really difficult period. As relieved as I know we can all be, the vaccinations are on the way. The pandemic is obviously an experience that will mark all of us for the rest of our lives. Tomorrow's a big day, and I know many of us are operating at this point on this weird cocktail of hope and anxiety. While it would be so much better to be all together in person, let us be grateful for being in the comfort and safety of our own homes and our own slippers. And at least for this hour, for having something to distract us away from the 24/7 newsfeed. Not many people agree with me on this, but I actually love January. I know it is cold, it is dark, and all of the fun parts of the year are really far away. But this time of year, I think, has its own kind of quiet magic. Before we get into the frenzy of the fall sales period and all of the busier months, we have this chance to look back in the rearview mirror and pull out the insights that we can and figure out how we want to apply them to our lives going forward. Now, this January in particular, when hindsight is for the first time literally 2020, the look back is weightier than ever before. I have no expertise in something useful like public health or politics or economic policy, so I will leave the real big questions to those experts and hope that somehow, as we go into the future, wisdom prevails and sets us on a path towards greater equity and sustainability. A girl can at least dream. What we know about here, us together, are books and the publishing ecosystem. So the question is, what did 2020 mean for us, and is that going to matter long term? That's what I'd like to focus on in the next few moments. If we had all taken, in our separate companies, if we'd all taken a flash survey of how people were feeling last April, I am sure that we would have made some extremely dark predictions about what was going to happen in the industry by the end of the year. Sales at that point had already fallen off a cliff. Bookstores were at least temporarily shuttered. Media coverage for books had pretty much disappeared. And companies were scrambling to ensure the health of employees in printing and distribution, where remote work is not an option. Some companies had announced furloughs and salary cuts. Everyone was worried about job security. That was April, just 9 months ago. And yet here we are, looking at industry sales results showing that consumers bought more than 10% more books in 2020 than they had in the year before. For an industry as large and mature as book publishing, that is an extraordinary result. The predictions we would have made together back in April would, it turns out, have been completely wrong. So please keep that in mind as we now try to make some predictions about the future. Industry predictions are usually wrong, but that is not going to stop us from making them. So let's start at the most important point, which is with the readers themselves. What was it that went into their increased drive to buy books last year, and is that pattern going to continue? Now, of course, keep in mind that books were not the only consumer product that benefited last year. Consumers who still did have incomes found that they had excess cash and that they normally would have been spending on things like doing things and going places. But instead, they were trapped at home and bored, and so they bought stuff. And some of that stuff was our stuff. Once we get to a vaccinated world and we can actually, again, go out and do things and socialize with each other and travel, some of those spending patterns, I assume, will go back to somewhat to normal patterns that we had before. But my prediction is that it will not revert completely to the way it was before. I think that the demand that we are now seeing for books will be sustained, at least to some degree, over the long term. And here's why. The increase in sales wasn't just in a single category, and it wasn't driven by a couple of blockbuster books. In fact, new releases in general were down last year compared to the previous years, mainly because we lost the benefit of in-store browsing. Instead, in actually a pretty healthy way, the growth was spread across nearly every category and deep into the backlist. You guys know this. Kids' books benefited first as parents looked for off-screen activities to provide comfort, entertainment, and even education to their families. Then adult fiction bounced back, with readers shifting from the high anxiety phase, in which no books were read, to the medium anxious and bored phase that we're still in now. People who'd fallen out of the habit of reading rediscovered the unique solace that books provide. Feeling confined by their living spaces, readers found escape on the page. Then the hobbies kicked in. As Americans explored every possible nook and crannies of their homes and yards, looking for ways to pass the time, they also found their way through every category of practical nonfiction, from baking to pickling, to gardening, to crafting. For a while there, it felt like we were all Little House on the Prairie reenactors with how-to books instead of Ma and Pa to show us the way. After these three waves across kids and adult fiction and nonfiction, practical nonfiction, after those three waves kind of built demand back to fairly normal levels by early June, we then experienced the next lesson of the role that books would play in Americans' lives in 2020, the cultural reckoning with racial justice triggered by the death of George Floyd at the end of May. As we as a society have struggled to come to terms with our history and our present, many of us have turned to books and their authors to educate ourselves and to illuminate the path forward. The June bestseller list, completely filled with books on racism and white privilege, was a concrete demonstration of the contribution of authors and publishers to this process. Across all these very different impulses towards education and enlightenment, inspiration and distraction, books provided answers to the questions and needs our consumers had in 2020. And they did so in such differentiated ways that I believe these readers are going to find that impulse to reach for a book as a way to scratch a very wide range of different itches. It's not going to just go away when we can leave our houses again. So let's assume good news for once. Let's assume a future where what we produce together keeps being very much in demand. The next set of questions coming out of 2020 relate to how we met that demand together and what it means for our work going forward. Last March, we learned right away that just as the pandemic was impacting different segments of society in very different ways, we too were experiencing it in different ways through different parts of our own community, with a stark dividing line between those who could work remotely and those who couldn't and still can't. The revelation of remote work was an incredibly positive one. After years of resistance to fully flexible work arrangements and fully, truly digital workflows, it turns out that most publishing functions really can be done anywhere. The transition was easier for some than for others. One of the biggest challenges companies had was getting design and production teams with needs for higher end hardware set up remotely, especially when most companies were at least temporarily strapped for cash. But by now, with some exceptions, hopefully most publishing employees feel like they can do their work anywhere where there's an internet connection. So what does that mean for the future of work for this part of our population? It will mean different things to different people. Some who've moved temporarily to different parts of the country will probably decide to make those moves permanent, and the industry will benefit from having a more diverse geographic perspective than we've had in the past. Some will want to come back into the offices 5 days a week and never look back at working out of their kitchens and bedrooms. Most of us will be somewhere in between, wanting to be together in person to collaborate and share creative energy when it's appropriate, and to retreat to our separate remote environments for focus and flexibility. Company owners will see an opportunity to reduce rent costs by contracting space, while employees will hope to hold on to the space, but just to use it in different ways. Designing this hybrid world will be a challenge, but one that I hope will pull on our most creative instincts. The potential for building together a future of work that is flexible, democratic, empowering, and human-centered is really exciting. Meanwhile, while this was going on in the remote space, many did not have that option. For those who work on what is still, blessedly for the most part, including many of you on this call, the very physical business of making, shipping, and selling print books, there was no way to do this essential work remotely. At Penguin Random House, we have always felt that the supply chain is central to our work. And from day one of contingency planning around the building crisis in March, our distribution leadership team was an integral part of the discussion. They were able to quickly reinvent the physical workflow in the warehouses to minimize contact between individuals and shifts, and to make the spaces as safe as possible. We also added significantly to our distribution workforce so that we could implement policies to support not just those who were sick, but also for anyone who thought they might have been exposed or might have or had a family member who was in need. As difficult an experience as this has been for our distribution team, I know they feel the support and the appreciation of the entire rest of the company. While there has always been a tight connection between our different locations, I think that bond has become even tighter over the course of the year, as those who are now remote have come to appreciate even more keenly that the work taking place in our warehouses was the essential element keeping us in business. Tragically, as we've seen, it's been much rougher going on the manufacturing side. Our friends and our partners in printing and binding came into the crisis already struggling with capacity constraints, and things have just gotten harder every month. Having unprecedented levels of demand being pushed through plants with COVID constraints is clearly creating pain for all of us to share. This remains the single most urgent problem for all of us to work together to solve, and it's my biggest priority this year. I want also to note the plight of our final set of physical partners, the bookstores who were shaken to their core by the lockdowns. So many of them have been extraordinarily resilient, kicking their online business into higher gear and inventing many, many new ways to connect with and serve their local customers. But even those with relatively healthy sales have struggled to make ends meet as their cost to fulfill those sales have gone up. Across all levels within PRH, we have worked to try to help them through, and we will continue to do so. While we feel it's our duty to provide support, it's also for the good of our own business. The booksellers play a central and vital role in supporting the discovery, particularly of new writers. Their work is essential to keeping our ecosystem healthy going forward. The final aspect of 2020 that I want to address is a cultural one. The year, if you rewind all the way back to last January, you'll remember that the year began with the American Dirt controversy. And while that involved one publisher, it was a clear wake-up call to the industry as a whole. At PRH, we had spent the previous few years gradually amping up our commitment to diversity and inclusion. But it was certainly not until 2020 that our work took on the urgency and the universality that is now in place. Meeting our company goals related to DE&I will take much longer than any of us would like, but we're going in the right direction, and I take heart in just how far the conversations have come in the past year. We're never going to get to a mission accomplished moment, but thanks to 2020, we have all collectively woken up and understand that achieving our goals is a responsibility shared across all levels and functions. And we understand that this work is an intrinsic part of being the employer, the publisher, and the business that we aspire to be. We have all just lived through a year that will be studied and written about for the rest of our lives. It will take some time before we have the distance needed to truly understand all that has happened and what it means. But for now, looking at the year ahead, what I think we can count on is, one, ongoing high demand for physical books across all categories. Two, ongoing stress as we try to fit that demand through pipes that aren't quite big enough. Three, ongoing work to build a future for our industry with an employee and a reader population that is more diverse than ever before. And four, ongoing work to partner together to help get all parts of our community and our ecosystem across publishing, manufacturing, and retail through to the other side of the pandemic in strong shape. What I will take away from this experience personally, above all, is the gratitude that I feel to work in a field and in a community that matters to society as a whole. As a final illustration of what this has looked and felt like, I want to leave you with one last example of our work last year, a consumer-facing campaign that we launched last spring called Books Connect Us. The effort grew organically out of the Igloo Outpost. The Igloo Outpost was a page that we launched on Facebook for our employees on our first day of remote work, March 13th. It immediately became a thriving hub of community support, with colleagues helping each other through those dark, early, isolating days. More often than not, colleagues were putting their advice in the form of book recommendations. We noted with joy that it was the books themselves that were providing comfort and keeping us all connected to each other. So a few weeks later, someone had the idea of offering this message of connection through books out to readers. And it quickly became a central rallying cry for our publishers and authors and for many booksellers and librarians. Over the course of the year, the campaign reached more than 100 million consumers. That is far and away the most successful and far-reaching campaign that we have ever run. Back in May, we captured at least the first parts of this campaign in a video. And I'd like to share that with you now by way of closing. And the video is just a couple of minutes long. And then when we come back, I will go through some of the questions that you sent in advance. So let me do this. Can we roll the video, please? Thank you. It's just a quick little thing, but I just think it's a great reminder of a great visual reminder of the different ways that that our authors in particular offered themselves up to the readers who were so in need of them at home. And I'm really grateful for the way that so many of our book selling and library partners really joined us in getting that message out to consumers who needed it. Okay, so you guys had a couple of questions for me. They were good questions and they're kind of all over the place. So I'm going to self-moderate here and ask myself the question and see what I come up with in terms of an answer. So first up, how do I see the new Barnes & Noble strategy affecting PRH's business and the publishing industry? It's a good question. I am really, really encouraged by what James Daunt has been doing at Barnes & Noble. It can be kind of hard to experience, I think, as a publisher in a way, because a lot of what he is doing is about taking control away from us. But what I like about it is that it feels like the book selling skill is finally back in charge at Barnes & Noble. In the last decade, I have now kind of lost track how many different top CEOs and administrations of Barnes & Noble we went through. And each time one came through from some other industry, we would have to feel like we were starting again from scratch, explaining why books are a little different than other consumer products, why you can't treat them like a commodity, why each product is really actually kind of different than all the other products. And we always would kind of get there, but it was really a struggle, I think, for the real book experts within Barnes & Noble to get their voices heard. And it was not productive, I think, in terms of serving the cause of keeping Barnes & Noble alive as a viable and vital bookseller. So what Daunt has done clearly is to kind of take back the keys. He is not interested in publishers kind of providing financial incentives that would, like co-op, that would advantage one book after another. He is really looking at the books on their merits. And I think that is much better for all of us. I think it kind of keeps us honest in terms of putting forward to the Barnes & Noble customers the very best that we have to offer. And that doesn't just mean the best in terms of some kind of arbitrary literary quality, but it can still be kind of a big tent that allows lots of different categories and flavors of books to be served. But it is one that very much does put the focus back on what does a Barnes & Noble consumer really want to buy, and how do we present it to them, as opposed to how is this publisher, what are the best terms this publisher is going to offer to me, and how do I use that to change what the assortment is. So I'm, as you can hear, I'm a fan of what they are doing. Certainly they have they were not lucky in terms of the period of time in which they've had to execute this turnaround. To have a pandemic, which obviously it's global in nature. So for Daunt to have to manage this both with Barnes & Noble here in the US and Waterstones in the UK, I don't think managing it in multiple territories makes it any easier. So they've had that as a challenge. And then as you'll recall in the fall, they had a pretty massive system hacking. So we have been working closely with them to do what we can to help them through it. But I'm, despite all of that, despite all those hard things that they're trying to do, I really am very hopeful that that they're going to emerge out of this much stronger than they have been in the past. So that is Barnes & Noble. Question number 2. This is a good one for this crowd. How did PRH pull off the Barack Obama book in the midst of these print and distribution challenges? It is a good question, because that is some kind of minor miracle what the teams were able to pull off, really, with our partners in printing and retail. A couple of things to highlight, and I asked Lisa Fior kind of from Random House what she would particularly put an emphasis on. For her, not surprisingly, three key words were collaboration, communication, and planning across all of Penguin Random House and with our partners to get this to happen. Although the publication announcement may have kind of seemed to the market like it was a drop-in, because we announced it fairly close to the on sale date, it was not a drop-in. We maybe didn't know that far in advance when the final complete manuscript was going to truly be delivered, but we started making plans for both the materials and the manufacturing with our partners more than a year in advance of when we brought it to market. We were very clear on the mission critical milestones early in the process, and we're very clear with that about that with everybody who needed to touch the book. And that really helped us to be very well prepared for the deadlines before they were on top of us. Books were manufactured over a period of months, not weeks. How Lisa pulled that off, I believe her to share with you at some point. But it was more spread out than it would have appeared. You may know this, that we produced more than a third of the first printing actually in Germany. And then we, just because we were paranoid, we even air freighted a portion of those books as insurance against possible shipping and or port delays. So we really were very focused on making sure that every one of our customers had books before day one, so that everybody would have their fair shot at being able to sell the book. And we were able to meet that requirement. The books that we produced in North America were split across 3 of our core PRH suppliers. And we used a total of 5 different printing locations for those 3 suppliers. We took advantage, finally, of a staggered binding schedule at each of the vendor locations to maximize the efficiency of drop shipments of the books. So all of that, if I made it sound at all simple, of course it wasn't. It kind of felt simple to me as I got to watch from the side as the team executed this, and I think they did an extraordinary job. I think it's a beautiful book. Obviously, the readers and reviewers seem to agree as well, because it has performed very well. So we are very grateful for all of you out there who had anything to do with helping to pull this off. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for those who also helped us while this huge gorilla was coming in to the schedule, helped us to be able to find capacity to print the rest of our very needy books. Thank you for that as well. We have many people we are grateful for after this publication. All right, last couple of questions, and then I will let you all get kind of back to your dinners. This is a good question. Out of all the books that I read in the last 2 years, which title stands out most and why? So you guys know this is a little bit like the Sophie's Choice question. You love all your children, and it's terrible to pick just one of them out. But the one that jumps to mind reading that question is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram Kendi. And I say that not because I particularly enjoyed reading it. I really didn't. It is a hard book to read. And I don't mean that from a making your way through the sentences is challenging because of structure. It's because what he is writing about, what he addresses, is just makes you think. And there were pages in the book, paragraphs, sentences that I came to where I said, no, I don't agree with you on that. I wanted to kind of have an argument with him about it. But then I would pause and think and go back and read it again and really think about how, the gaps in my own education as I came through schools. I went to very good schools where there should have been no excuse. And yet somehow I feel like I came out of my education with some pretty big gaps in understanding the racial history of the United States. And he opened my eyes in many ways. And I think reading the book has helped me to participate in a much more constructive way in the conversations within our company about race, and thinking about what we at Penguin Random House need to do to truly make change for good going forward. So it was not a pleasurable read. And there were other books that I read last year that maybe gave me more pleasure and kind of stress relief at times when I needed it. But that was the one that I think is going to stick with me for the longest. So that's the one I would point out. And then you have worked at PRH for more than 20 years in a variety of roles and departments. What has been your favorite or favorites? Again, kind of the Sophie's Choice topic. I have indeed worked at this company or parts of the company before this one was formulated for a very long time. And I've been blessed to have many fantastic different kinds of jobs and experiences. I think some of the ones that are maybe my most favorite, first really is working in the sales department, because there is just something awfully magical about being in the sales department. And I say that I don't think I'm particularly good at selling myself. It's not about that. It is that when you're in the sales department, you're really in the nerve center of the whole company. And kind of everything that's going on with all the books and with the customers and with the publishers. And I don't think there's any other part of the company, including where I am now as the CEO, where you really know as much as you do when you're in sales. So that's probably my most favorite. Different kinds of experiences. I certainly loved being the audio publisher, which I got to be at one point, because in particular, not just because I'm a fan of audiobooks, which I am, but because I had the good fortune to be there for the particular moment of the real digital transformation of that market. And I learned so much about so many lessons about what you need to pay attention to as your whole business model goes digital, that I was then able to apply later to ebooks. And doing it in audio first, kind of nobody was paying much attention to us. And so it felt a little bit like a safe space, plus awesome colleagues and really just fun work. So audio was great. And then the job that if this job hadn't come along, I would have been very happy to do the entire rest of my life, was being the head of Penguin Publishing, which, my God, what an incredible group of talented, dynamic, high-spirited, opinionated, smart publishers to work with fantastic lists. And really, as I said, if the CEO gig hadn't come along when it did, I would have been very happy to be able to just lead Penguin the rest of my days. And I think that is about it. Thank you so much for all of these questions. And Karen, I don't know if you have any final things you want to throw at me or
No, no, I think you've had enough thrown at you already. I don't want to cause any injuries. Um, Really, Madeline, I cannot thank you enough. And if really for me, above all else, your incredible enthusiasm and passion for the business has really come through. And you've given me personally a lot to think about. And I'm very, very excited going forward into this year. And your enthusiasm is just what we frankly all need at this point in time, where we know, there's some amount of optimism, some light at the end of the tunnel, but to have people like yourself directing this is really, I know makes everybody else who I can't see out there feel a lot better as well. And for those of you who don't know, Madeline put in a lot of time and thought and was very, very kind to give us the time in this busy schedule. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And for everybody else who's out there, and Madeline, if you're so inclined, on February 9th, we have our health and wellness meeting. It will come back with a catchy title at some point, but right now we're with health and wellness, and we invite you all to join us again. So thank
Well,
you.
Karen, thank you very much. And my only regret about this is that it would have been great to be able to actually see everybody out there. It's always a little strange, as we know, to just speak into a screen and hope everybody can hear you. But I look forward to the after times when we can all come together and maybe raise a glass of final celebration for when we make it through.
We definitely promise to invade your building once again when we're all vaccinated. So
I look forward to that.
great. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
Good night
Bye.
to everybody.